Hello, this is Joe Polish.
And this is Dan Sullivan.
And here we are, Dan, 10xTalk.com.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of really great subjects in previous episodes, and today you have an idea. The last one that we talked about, I think it was on the abundance neighborhood.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go with whatever direction you want to go in.
Well, I was giving a lot of thought because we're introducing more and more strategic coach participants to your program, Joe, which is Genius Network and commonly called 25K. So what I'd like to do, and probably if we can just capture like in 30 minutes or 35 minutes, is just give the history of it, what's happened that has really been very, very significant about what you've achieved so far, and then what is currently happening that's giving you a great sense of energy and everybody else in the program a great sense of energy. And then what I'd like to talk about is things that you can see on the horizon that you can see are going to be really bigger and better for the program. And then we're just going to talk about 5 things which really have some zing to them. These are like things that you know because you're working with some of the greatest marketing, some of the greatest packaging, some of the greatest networking people on the planet who are members of Genius Network, and just little things which most people wouldn't think of but can be expressed very, very shortly, which people can instantly get, and then it triggers decisions, and they're able to actually get very, very actionable results out of it. So I just start off with, if you go back to the whole concept of Genius Network, because I remember when I first got to know you, you were already well established with this thought because of your interview series. So where was the crossover for you to actually get the idea of just interviewing people who had really unique takes on the world, who kind of had world-changing concepts and techniques and everything else? Really take it back to the moment of, the Big Bang for the Genius Network.
Yeah, I mean, I could take you back to 1995 when I was publishing the Piranha Marketing Letter, which was basically teaching my clients in the service industry how to use direct response marketing in order to educate their clients and position themselves as to why someone should do business with them versus anyone else. And I would teach people how to actually communicate things other than price, because my premise was if you don't have a system for selling what it is you're selling, the consumer, the prospect, the patient, the customer has a system for buying, and it's based on price. Mm-hmm. And so if the only criteria you give is price, then that's what they're going to select. And so you always have tens of thousands of business owners that are frustrated because they think all people care about is price, when in reality they've not given them any other criteria to think about, because most people lead with price.
Joe, would you say that selling on price actually indicates an incredible lack of originality and creativity on the part of the person trying to sell something?
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't take any genius in order to default to the same thing that everyone else does. The worst offer that you can make is no offer at all, which is what image advertising is and a lot of brand advertising. It's just putting a name out there and hoping that people are going to flock to you. The second worst offer you can make is lowest price, unless you really are in a situation where you can be competitive, like a Walmart. Mm-hmm. But even Walmart offers alternative forms of service and various point of purchase and location and stuff that they can still get by with the lowest price. But that's not a game that most business owners ever want to play in. And even if they do, they're usually going to get squashed because it's just a bad thing. So yes, I absolutely agree. It takes no originality whatsoever. And it's really being lazy. And people hate hearing that, but it's true. Mm-hmm. I mean, why should someone do business with you versus anyone else? So I was publishing the Piranha Marketing Letter, teaching people how to do all kinds of marketing strategies. In 1 month, I literally did not write it in time, and I was late. And I was like, okay, in order for me to sit down and produce the type of newsletter that I like, and Dan, granted, this was back before the internet, so it was paper and ink, and I would write something, it would have to be edited, laid out, printed, stamped, dropped in the mail. So it wasn't something where, let me write a newsletter and I can get it to people the next day by emailing it. That did not exist yet. So what I did was I said, I'm going to interview a guy on sales and persuasion. And so I recorded it on a cassette tape, because that's what we sent out back then, and mailed all of my clients an interview that I did with a sales and persuasion expert. And I had a little cover letter that said I didn't want to sit down and write this month's newsletter. I told him the truth. I was behind. And so I decided to do this and send it to you instead. I hope you like it. And, talk to you next month.
Can I stop you right there, Joe? What have you found the impact of taking people kind of like backstage? I really got caught in a situation and, I'm trying to bail myself out. So instead of delivering what I had promised to do I'm delivering something else. What does being really, really honest in the backstage actually do to people's thinking when they receive that message?
Well, I think what it does is it builds incredible rapport and incredible trust. Unless what you're sending them out is, they're paying for something and you're sending them garbage, assuming it's not that, people are going to be like, wow, this is a conscientious person that really cares. And the number one thing that I have found for longevity with clientele, and I've had clients that have been with me since the month I started my marketing company, is bond. You need to bond with people. So bonding is the most important thing. And so when you take people backstage, I think it just really allows you to bond. And, I could say that word over and over again and people can hear it, but I would encourage everyone to think, how bonded are you with your best clients? How bonded are you with your vendors? How bonded are you with people that introduce you and refer you to other people? How bonded are you, with your community, online, offline, in person? Yeah, and so taking people backstage, there's a term in marketing, a strategy called a damaging admission. And I think it's along the same lines where if there's, if you're really great in some areas, but you're not so great in others, instead of trying to hide it and highlight all when you can point out a flaw and do it in the right way, mixed in with all of the great things, like, hey, we're the most expensive and, we can't get you the stuff quickly, but we're extraordinarily world-class and we're very unique. I mean, even if you have slow service and you cannot fix it. I mean, you cannot fix it because you happen to be in a business selling something customized, as an example. A lot of people would not talk about how long it'll take, but some people can position it that, it takes 6 months to get one of these rings made by this jeweler. But if you really highlight the damaging admission part of it, you may have a waiting list for 2 years.
Yeah. And you know what I found about your interviewing style, starting with the original Genius Network series, is that the best interviews you've done is where you've asked the person on the other side to actually reveal something about their worst mistake or the best recovery they made from a real setback and everything like that. And what I've noticed by listening to them, that the ones who, first of all, are receptive to you doing that are by far the most powerful interviews. And the ones who resist it come across as, it's one-dimensional. They come across, they're only telling you what they want you to hear. They're not really, really telling you about what actually happened.
Yes, and a lot of people that have a shtick, and what you want to do, some shticks are great. I mean, you can learn a lot from people's lessons and from what they have to share and what their strategies. People that always are super polished and they don't want to reveal the human side of them, and the fact that most people that are successful have had days of hell, years of hell sometimes, and have had to really overcome tremendous things, from just idiotic, stupid mistakes that they made themselves, to betrayal, to marketplace conditions, to, their office burning down. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen to people. And I think when someone's able to share those, I'll say it this way. People can relate because you can teach people. For instance, I mean, I know my marketing strategies work. I mean, it's not even a question. There's such a preponderance of proof that people that follow the system get results.
Yeah.
That's no doubt. The same thing with Strategic Coach. I mean, you have a preponderance of proof that anyone that goes through Strategic Coach is, in most cases, from very early on, one of your main things is we're going to teach you how to double your income and take an enormous amount of free time. And people would do that over and over and over again if they actually went through Strategic Coach and if they actually applied what you taught. So there's no doubt there. The big question when it comes to obstacles in people's minds is not, does it work for Dan? Not, does it work for Joe? Not, does it work for this person over here or this client? But will it work for me? And the more that someone can actually relate as a real human being saying, hey, I had every obstacle and I had all of these challenges and I live in the same world as everyone else. And here's how I kind of overcame it. And here's what I've done. Not only do you help people understand kind of how to deal with it, but you also become very relatable. And that's important.
Well, I'm going to talk about the impact of doing the Genius Network series on the development of the current Genius Network. But one of the things that, I've often talked about, that the turning point in my life was August 15th, 1978, when I was divorced in the morning and bankrupt in the afternoon. Men generally in our society have two big scorecards. One is their success with a personal relationship, and the other one is their success with money. And I said, I just got two failing cards on the same day. The biggest reason why that was a breakthrough is that I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't try to explain it away to myself. I said, this is serious business, and if you don't change your ways, you're going to keep ending up with scorecards like this for the rest of your life. And I tell people that, and I said, everything I've created in Strategic Coach comes from a series of decisions that I made about that day, August 15th, 1978, and I turned my life around, and I've continued turning it around from that. And anytime I start getting sloppy or complacent, I said, just remember August 15th, 1978. And I think I find, and Joe, you can reflect on this with, obviously, you've been very forthcoming about your own life, but I think that generally speaking, that makes it real for people when you talk about, geez, I've had something like that too. Everybody has that. It's called life. It's unpredictable. It happens to us. So I think that you've got a unique ability to really zero in on that. I think you're naturally talented, but you got some experience that have prepared you to talk about life on that level. But just talk about the development and, how many different interviews you've done, because to this day, you keep doing that series, and just talk about how it then formed the much larger picture of the organization that you've created around the idea of Genius Network.
Yeah, so what I started doing is after that first initial interview that I sent out, I got a slew of letters mailed to me and fax letters, because people would use fax a lot back then, saying, I love this. This was so great. Please do more of these. And so, of course, anyone that's a marketer that has your clients asking you or saying, I really liked what you did, you should really pay attention to what people say they like or dislike, because that will give you a lot of clues. And that always amazes me too. People won't get a response to a marketing campaign, like no one will respond. And they'll go and they'll put together a focus group, or they'll hire consultants. And I'll be like, well, did you ask anyone that you made the offer to why they didn't buy? You're going to get way more valuable input. It probably won't cost you thousands of dollars to sit around in a room with people that don't even know they aren't even your own customers, trying to give you advice on why they think someone hasn't bought. Just call people that bought and find out why did they buy, call people that didn't buy and find out why they didn't buy. So that was the first clue. And I've always listened to what people say. There's great feedback in your own client base and in the base of people that don't respond at all. And so I started doing it. And every month I started recording one, and it was originally called the Joe Polish Superstar Audio Tape of the Month program, which looking back was comical and totally ridiculous at the same time, but it worked. And I charged $18.53 per month. And it was a continuity program, one of the very first continuity programs that I had done, which was a huge aha, like, it's just as hard to get somebody to buy a book once or a course once or sign up for something once as it is to get them to give you money over and over and over again. And if they like it, they're going to continue to pay for it the same way people pay for their cell phone. And so I started doing that. Now, fast forward to today, I've interviewed over 400 people, amazing entrepreneurs. As soon as I joined Strategic Coach, I was really clear that this is one incredibly smart, insightful, experienced individual, meaning you, that is saying things that I've not heard from anyone else, that I've never read from any other book, that has a very unique twist on success, and not just success financially, but success in life and in abilities. And so I interviewed you very early on because I wanted to bring to my audience expertise that I could not do. And so one thing this required, and a lot of people will not do this, is I never wanted to be a guru. People considered me a quote unquote marketing expert and the guy that they would go to for marketing advice in the niches that I was selling to. But I was like, look, I'm just a guy that learned a lot about marketing, and I would downplay it. I used a lot of self-deprecating humor because I for one, I think it's funny. And secondly, I don't feel that I have it all together in all kinds of other areas. And there's lots of areas in life that are important to have it together in, from health to how you manage your time, to how you manage money, to how you organize and prioritize projects, to how you do all kinds of different types of marketing and advertising. And so I would interview people that had unique wisdom. And after doing it, I thought, this is a wisdom network.
Mm-hmm.
This is really different than data. This is about bringing real wisdom, because like you were saying earlier, when you interview people about their life and you hear these unique stories, or I would interview book authors and I would talk about, some of the stuff they would write books about, but a lot of times I would get into stuff that they never wrote about or that they aren't really sharing, and I would have them reveal stuff. So it was very unique content.
Yeah, and probably the more you do it, the better you get at it. But can you talk a little bit? At one point, did you realize that you could do something that nobody else could do? Because I think every entrepreneur has a crossover point when they stop comparing themselves to other people and they just said, there's something here that nobody else can pull off that I can, and I don't think anyone else can learn it the way that I do it. Was there a moment, a particular interview or certain number of years into the process when you began to grasp that?
Well, I think I got that about probably 3 years into my business, that what came very easily for me was not very easy for other people. So I kind of knew it deep inside that I sort of had a way of building rapport, asking.
Yeah.
I was very much about speed of implementation, but I'll tell you, in terms of having real confidence versus just kind of an idea or a thought about it, really came from being in Strategic Coach. Because when I really was introduced to the concept of unique ability, that's when it really started to make sense. So I think it really solidified itself when I first interviewed you, simply because you have a unique ability in the area of being able to point out and see skills in others that a lot of times people don't even see in themselves.
Yeah.
And you're an edifier, as am I. I'm an incredibly good edifier. I think to this day, one of my greatest skills is if I see someone, be it a book, a seminar, a person, an event, anything that I think is really incredible or world-class or unique or useful, I just have a way of telling other people about it and doing it in a way where those people tend to take action. So I'm persuasive.
Yeah.
And I don't think about persuasive as like I don't have a canned sales pitch. I don't pull out technique lines. I'm sure I have riffs and things.
No, I think the big thing is that you're like a great jazz musician. Jazz is like stand-up comedy or improv side of comedy, where people seem to do magic on stage. They just seem to be able to make up things. But you can take 5 jazz musicians who are really good and put them together, and they seem to actually create stuff, but they've done so much stuff that they've got what I call riffs. A riff is, it could be 3 or 4 minute bar, which just always works, and you can change the key, you can change the pace, you can change everything about it, but all the really great musicians actually recognize riffs. So if one guy starts a riff, they can immediately adjust themselves to it. And what I've noticed over the years is that you do not have a script. You do not have it prepared. But what you have is probably 100, 150, 200 different 1 or 2 minute explanations of something or a particular way of explaining something that always works. And so you're always sitting there saying, is it number 107? Is it number 2? And you don't even think about it. You just use them.
Right. And as long as you continue to develop that and you see something that's working, you keep doing it. One thing that, I heard you say early on is if you spend your whole life trying to strengthen the things you're weak at the end of your life, you have a lot of really strong weaknesses.
Yeah, you're oppressively weak.
Yeah.
You're overwhelmingly weak. Talk about being really good at something. You are fantastically good at something that you're not any good at.
And the worst thing is that you're frustrated continuously with it.
Oh, yeah. And you frustrate everyone else, and they don't invite you to parties, and then you feel picked on, and then you're a victim, and then you ask for some sort of government grant.
That is great. Oh, man. Yeah, so basically what I started doing is I just kept doing it, and I kept sharing it with people. And when I got my first letter sent to me where someone basically made this statement that they had made over $1 million listening to the interviews I'd done in the last year, and this person had listened to something like 10 or 12 interviews, and they implemented the ideas. and they were taking it very seriously. And I also realized there's a lot of people that will listen to stuff and they don't apply it. And there's other people that will listen to it and they really take it seriously. And I like people that utilize great ideas, because there's nothing worse than kind of like throwing pearls before swine sort of thing, where people just don't do anything with it. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty impactful. I'm not just interviewing interesting people and learning myself, because the real thing too, and I've said this plenty of times on my interviews, is what a great way for me to get paid to learn.
Yeah.
I go and interview people. I charge people for interviews. Now, fast forward today, like what we're doing with 10xTalk, we're putting incredibly great content out into the world and we're not even charging people.
Yeah. And the whole point is that I've learned more and more, and I think I learned it from you more than almost any other person. Just create good in the world and don't worry about where it shows up later. Don't worry about the payoff. And, I know we have a really growing audience of individuals who are listening to 10 Times Talk over the world. If I could give you one thing that is absolutely at the core of what I know at going on 70 years old, is create value and don't worry about how you get paid for it.
Yep. Because if you try to choke it, it tends to not give back. There are ways to really create an enormous following, an enormous fan base, and a tremendous amount of goodwill by simply being useful. And that's not to say that at some point you don't have things for sale. You literally need to make it fun and easy for people to do business with you too.
Yeah.
And if you have that set up, if you have things that people can buy from you, you create so much reciprocity by being helpful and useful to people that they just want to do business with you. And that was the whole premise of education-based marketing. In a lot of ways, I look at it today. My very first consumer awareness guide to carpet cleaners that would teach people how to choose a carpet cleaning company when I was a carpet cleaner in the early 90s, and transformed that business simply by using education-based marketing. Even to this day, our podcast is education-based marketing. Most of the time we don't have any call to action. We talk about 25K group. We talk about strategic coach. We hope that for people that are right fit and resonate with what we're saying, they will look into those programs and they will join. Yeah, that would be great. That would be wonderful. And we also know that the vast majority of people that listen to this are never going to join your program or never going to join mine, but they may pick something up and they may think like, wow, I want to learn more from Dan Sullivan. So I'm going to go to Amazon and buy some of Dan's books. Or I want to know more about Joe Polish and I'm going to go look at what he's doing. And I think everyone should adopt that sort of relationship with prospects, because the number one thing, and anyone that studies marketing will hear this terminology said in many different ways, you want people to know, like, and trust you. People will do business with people they know, like, and trust. And it's one of the lines I heard you say, Dan, is, people don't buy from you because they understand what you do. People buy from you because they feel understood.
Yeah.
And when you talk about your marriage and your divorce and your bankruptcy on the same day, anyone that has had any sort of shit in their life realizes, wow, here's the guy who's the world's top coach of successful entrepreneurs in the world. He had a really crappy day in 1978. His life wasn't together. And when they hear that I was a former drug addict, they're like, wow, a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. We had a conversation not too long ago, and lasted a whole afternoon, and I just asked you, well, Joe, when you look at those really, really bad days in your life, what are some of the crucial life-changing lessons that you learned from them? And, it filled up about 3 or 4 hours of just things that you had learned from that. And there's a really, really great writer out of New York City by the name of Louis Schiff. And Louis Schiff wrote a huge bestseller called Middle Class Millionaires, about just how people who just are average people who live in average towns and places become millionaires. And he just sort of went down their day-to-day attitudes and behavior. But he just brought out another book, which is Business Brilliant. And he came to our company and actually put on kind of an explanation of the research. And he found out a very interesting thing between people who just minimally make a good income in life and people who are huge, what he calls ultra wealthy people. And he said that there was one difference that came out of their research. It was very extensive research that they did over about a 3-year period. And they said that minimally successful people hide their mistakes, and really ultra rich people, that's all they want to talk about is their mistakes.
Right.
And he said it's the hiding of your mistakes which prevents you from actually becoming good. But not only that, you're spending an incredible amount of energy hiding the negative so that you never actually get the energy to develop the positive in you, where multimillionaires and billionaires, they just want to talk to other people. What's the biggest mistake you made? And I'll tell you mine, and this is what I learned from it. The wealthier the people are and the more successful, I mean, there's people who are twisted and they don't want to talk about that, but the ones you really trust are the ones who say, I can just tell you about some incredible setbacks I had, and I almost gave up here, and I had some incredible time when I was just hanging on by my fingertips, and I got through it. And what that taught me was this, just just do hand exercises so your fingers are really strong,
Right.
And he said that's the biggest difference he noticed is just the incredible honesty of the ultra-rich and the kind of presenting a story that isn't real on the part of the people who are just minimally successful. And I think if you took your 400 interviews and you said, who was the interview that seemed to get across the most to the audience, I think you would find the ones who tried to hide their mistakes were the least effective interviews, and the ones who really were very, very forthcoming, and they were very, very honest. But not only that, they told you about the transformation that they experienced. I'm sure that those were by far the most powerful and popular of your interview series.
For sure, and definitely from people that can relate to the audience. Because, there's that saying that which is most private is most public, meaning the things that you think that you're the only one that's going through, you'd be surprised how many other people are going through those things. And you just reminded me of something about, this is probably a year ago. I have a friend who runs a foundation called Mending Kids, and they actually get doctors that will do life-threatening surgeries on children, and they'll fly them to different locations and stuff to help these kids. So they had this celebrity charity event, and it was a poker event. It was pretty funny. I ended up playing poker with Jodie Foster for like an hour, and it was not gambling poker, just like a game thing, but it was this fundraiser. And so Gene Simmons was there from the rock band Kiss. And what's funny is he's actually become a very sharp businessman. I mean, he's built this incredible licensing business, and he has he's very much a capitalist. And what's funny is he's never had a sip of alcohol in his entire life. He's in a rock band. He's never drank or done drugs. And he said, coming to America from Israel, he goes, what it is I learned about America, what's so great about America is no one's trying to kill you for trying an idea. He's like, you can start anything in America. And, from the perspective of you can really screw up in America, you can make horrible mistakes, and, no one's going to kill you for it. It's just you made a mistake.
Well, not only that, Americans are fascinated what you're going to do with your setback. I think people are more fascinated with people who are really famous, not on their way up the first time. What happens is that they have a huge setback and they completely collapse and they tank out. And then Americans are really interested if the person can pick themselves up off the ground and actually come back stronger than ever. The comeback story in America is much, much more interesting than the original success story.
Yes, totally. So what ended up happening with Genius Network interview series is I interview all these people, and along the way, I'm realizing that I like curating knowledge and expertise of other people and sharing it with people. That's what a network is. It connects people. And so how am I connecting these people with the genius? And so I started doing coaching programs, and this started over the phone. We would do teleconferences, and we would charge about $250 a month, and people would be on a monthly 75-minute phone call, and we would talk with them live. And all these people along the way were also getting my interview series as part of it. So I would bundle it in, and it would be like a value add. And so I started doing higher level programs. And of course, I was doing annual events. And what was really great is as I'd interview a lot of these people, I would then have them become speakers for my event. And I learned how to use it as a marketing vehicle. So if someone's going to come and speak, why don't you interview the person and send it out to everyone that's going to register for the seminar so that they are educated about the person in advance. And so the people would show up to hear a speaker, and these speakers would have an audience that knew them and was familiar with them and was excited to see them much differently than most seminars that they would speak at, because a lot of times no one that they were speaking for would be sending out a copy of their book or a special interview with them. And so the speakers would just love coming to my events because they would embrace a crowd that found them awesome.
Yes.
So then, of course, I'm recording those conferences conferences, which I called them boot camps and super conferences. And we would then have another knowledge product that we would give to our clients. We would sell to people. And so I started doing high-level groups called Platinum. And those ranged in price from $1,000 a month to $17,000 a year for people in the service business. I'm doing these for over a decade, and I would give away cars for something I called the Better Your Best contest. And a lot of that name came from being in Strategic Coach, and you had a great audio program combined with the book, and people can still get it from Strategic Coach, CDs and in a booklet, and it's called How the Best Get Better.
Yeah.
And so I started like, well, how do you better your best? Instead of comparing yourself to other people, which usually will leave you in the gap and leave you in a state of,
envy.
Yeah, not measuring up. Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you better your best? How do you take you and just make you a better version of yourself? Yeah. And so I was like, well, let me start creating competitions. Because a guy back then who I actually referred to Strategic Coach, and he ended up going to Strategic Coach, and it was instrumental in having him sell his company for $300 million back in 1999 was my client, Bill Phillips, who wrote a book called Body for Life. Mm-hmm. And so I was helping him with all of these physique transformation contests for people that were lifting weights and people that were taking his EAS sports supplements. And I mean, now everyone in the fitness world has in some way, shape, or form probably taken stuff from, the physique transformation contest and all that. So what I started doing was having these Better Your Best contests, and people would compete. And I would have these platinum groups where they would meet in person 4 times a year, a day at a time. And over the years, I tried different versions of, 2 days, 3 times a year, that sort of stuff. And then our annual event. And what I had found was giving people goal setting and giving people audio and written materials, getting them in a room in person was a far better way to get them engaged, because not only were they present, but also they're seeing all of these other success stories of how people are applying things. Yeah. And so that became an in-person Genius Network. See, I now refer to Genius Network not just as an interview series, but I have 25K group, which is our $25,000 a year group.
Well, I think it's your whole empire, because just an observation, I find that people who seem to be doing a lot of different things, when you really take a look at what they're doing, is that they're actually doing the same thing, but just finding new dimensions for it.
Yeah.
For me, this is kind of like the perfect setup. And then stage 2 will be when it actually materialized as probably the world's highest level, not probably, it is the world's highest level mastermind group for people involved in creation of intellectual capital, packaging intellectual capital, knowing how to use incredibly powerful technologies to distribute it, and, really take advantage of the fact that the number one industry in the world is actually the educational industry, but not in the conventional sense.
Right.
We've moved into ways, in fact, that the greatest education on the planet is actually taking place outside of the formal educational system.
Yes, for sure. And so to wrap up, and I'll continue talking about this on the next episode, is what ended up developing was what I ended up calling Genius Network, and it became a mastermind group. And on the next episode, I'll talk about how that formulated. And for all of the listeners, the main key points I wanted to remind you of what I learned along the way is one of the quickest, most effective ways to learn something is to ask other people that have a genius or immense wisdom in a particular area and record it. Whenever you start recording, people tend to be more serious because other people are going to hear it, and they operate at a heightened level. And by distributing it to other people, you're taking what's really useful for you and you're allowing other people to eavesdrop on those conversations, which is a great way to learn, and it creates bonding, it creates content. And along the way, you have this great term, strategic byproducts. What my life ended up becoming was I realized that every time I would do an interview, there would be a strategic byproduct that would come out of it, because it would give me an idea. It would plant a seed, and it would allow me to not only take different directions, because I would be continually learning by interviewing people, but as I shared those interviews with other people, they would develop strategic byproducts for themselves. And so I realized that I was basically pollinating these farms of entrepreneurs. And so when we started doing it in person, and now today with Genius Network, it's become an incredible thing. So geniusnetwork.com has links to pretty much everything, including the 25K group, which is our high-level group.
And all the 400 interviews that you've done.
Yeah. All that stuff is available. And so that's it. So thank you, Dan. I appreciate you asking me all these questions. And for all of our listeners, please give us your feedback and comments. I hope you take what we're sharing here and apply it in the ways that make sense for you. And if you want a genius network, you got to be a genius networker and do genius networking. And I believe everything that you're looking for in your future as it relates to business in your life can be found through developing a really powerful genius network. And everyone has it as long as they get it and understand that it's there. And if you nurture it and build it, it will produce for you. So that's it.
Okay, then that's just stage one of the whole development of Genius Network. And so we're going to continue on the next one with stage two.